Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts, Tom Vasel and Sam Healey.
Hey everybody!
Howdy!
Welcome to Miami Dice. Today we're looking at a board game called Myth. Although, this is about as, this is close to not being a board game. It's almost like being a miniatures game. It's a miniatures game in a box, presented as a board game.
Okay.
Well, either way, the Myth was a Kickstarter that raised quite a bit last year. It's a dungeon crawl where you have a group of heroes, and it's a cooperative game. The game itself will play the bad guys against you, and you go through and you try to accomplish different quests. Let's take a look. Now you have to realize that I'm not going to go over every rule to this game. I just want to give you a bit of a sense to how the game is played. You're going to be taking a group of up to 5 heroes. Here are the 5 heroes that are included in this game. Yes, this guy is a hero. He's a reformed rat man. And you'll be fighting up against enemies, including hideous bosses. This is the beast with 1,000 legs. Mini bosses, and then captains, and then hordes and hordes of minions. If you notice, it's one of the cool things is how each of the minions here has different models. I call this guy the street punk orc. Look at that guy. He wants your cell phone. But anyhow, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building scenarios where your guys are going to go and fight. This is basically a dungeon crawl in which you're just going to go and kick butt. Now, Myth is very open-ended. You can use a scenario from the book, and there's a very big rule book with all different things inside of it. You can use scenarios from cards. Some of these scenarios will chain together. Or you can kind of just freeform it, in which you go out here. This is one of the boards that's included with the game. And there's different size boards, and there's rules about connecting these boards. Once you finish a board, you go on to the next board. And whenever you go to a new board, the different tiles on it will show whether there's a trap on that board. And there's a whole pile of traps inside the book, and each of these traps has different specific ways that you will deal with the different traps. It will show you if there's any treasure available on the tile. It will show you if there's a monster group on the tile. And so this basically lets you, if you want to, you can just move from tile to tile and connect them in different ways as you go by and find new adventures and just freeform it. Or you can follow a very specific scenario where you have to go and accomplish something. And in fact, 2 of these tiles can go together to make a very giant tile that you can fight on. Here's a hero board, and each player will get a hero board, and you'll take a tile for your hero, and there's different, you can use either gender. So for example, this is a soldier tile, and I can place it right in here. I'll keep track of my hit points here, so I start with 7 hit points, and there's also a marker here to keep track of your threat. You might get some starting equipment. So for example here, the soldier starts with this adventurer's gear, a pot lid, and a fireplace poker, which is not the perhaps best gear in the world, and actually the adventurer's gear gives me an extra hit point, so I start with 8. But it's what you start with. And as the game progresses, there are different decks of cards, different treasures. One of the cool things about this game is whenever you find treasure on the board, you'll reach into this bag and pull one of these tokens out. And whatever token you pull out determines what deck you'll draw from. One of the decks, which is the most common token in the bag, is just some pieces of gold. And then there are green weapons, which are better than your starting equipment, but not as good as the very good blue weapons, which will give you better benefits. And as the game progresses, you want to get these, and there's ways to manipulate the tokens that go into this bag. As you can see, most of the bag is white and green. There's only a few blue, but you can add more of those tokens to the bag as the game progresses. One of the major features of this game is the deck of cards that comes for each character. This is what makes your character completely unique. Not your equipment, but this deck of cards. And one of the features of this game is as you complete stories and missions and things, you will be able to add extra cards to your deck. You can see there's a little green flame here. This is an extra one, and in fact the game rules are going to talk about how there will be lots more cards. Essentially you will eventually replace your original deck. But players are going to have a handful of cards that they're going to be using on their turn. And these cards, they seem to have, well, I shouldn't say they seem, they certainly have a lot of information on them. Many of the cards have arrows in the bottom which say that they are an action. So you play them as an action, and you can usually play only one action at a time. Other cards are reactions, and you can play those. Some cards can be played as an action or reaction, and some cards can be played when the enemy goes. Each card will tell you whatever that card is that it does. Many of the cards are attacks. For example, here the warrior has the Harvest of Bones, which lets him attack all targets in a 90-degree arc with one attack. And Rage, which is a specific thing that the soldier has. He has Rage, which are the cards can add to that, adds one additional square up to a maximum of 180 degrees. So if this guy's really enraged, he can really hurt a lot of enemies. On the side here, it shows special things. For example, if you don't move, that's what the top one means, you get to add an extra D10 to this attack. If you move cautiously, which means you only move one, you get to add one fate die to this attack. If you move, you can use this attack. And if you have used another special move basically before this attack, then you will have the target number is harder. It's harder for you to do this attack. Sometimes if you do a special attack or move completely, you aren't able to play these. So this is a pretty neat system here on the side. Now before we get into attacks and stuff, we also have to notice over here this symbol in the corner. This is an important symbol. You'll notice that shows one red line. Many times they show no red lines, and there are some that show 2 red lines or more. And those are going to increase the AP. Now this game has a very unusual method of how players play. See, essentially any player can go at any time. They can do whatever they want. So if I want to go before you, I can. If you want to go next, there's no turn order. However, each player they can only take one action before players take it, and they're also limited by their handful of 5 cards. But after a certain point, players will be able to take any more actions or they'll have any more cards, so they're able to all discard their hands. They can keep 1 card and draw 5 more cards. When they do that, AP is going to go up. So they have to be careful. You don't want to refresh all the time, or AP will go up. And also, playing many of the cards, as I just showed you, will cause this AP to go up. Now, this AP going up is a bad thing, because every time it reaches 6, you're going to draw a card from the darkness. Now, these darkness cards are different depending on the scenario. The one that comes with this game is called the Terror with 1,000 Legs. It will have an event that happens here. It will have a threat penalty. As players kill enemies, their threat is going to move on this threat board, and if anyone's threat gets up to 10, which means you kill a lot of enemies, then there will be a threat penalty. Now, threats can sometimes be good. For the warrior, it's good. And you can only play 4 different cards per turn, and each card that you don't play will reduce your threat every time you refresh, so there's that. But these threat penalties can be extremely bad. And then all the bad guys on the board are going to activate an attack in different orders, and then there's possibilities of more enemies spawning. There are spawn points on the board. Think of the video game Gauntlet, where enemies are going to spawn from these spawn points due to those cards. And you can attack the enemies, or you can attack spawn points if you can get to them. Once the spawn point is destroyed, you won't have any more enemies to fight. Now, most enemies are 1 hit point, but some enemies can be worse than that. Here's a couple enemies in the game. For example, here's these little crawlers. They have a number in the top. That's how, when you're attacking them, you will often be rolling 10-sided dice. The more 10-sided dice you roll, the better you have a chance to hit somebody. And for example, here to hit a crawler, I need a 4 or higher. Not so bad. To hit this stalker, I need a 5 or higher. But there are even bigger and harder guys to hit. For example, when I fight the Terror with 1,000 Legs, I need a 7 or higher. When you attack, you also will often roll fate dice, which can change the battle, can have different effects happen based on your character or the enemy that's rolling dice. So they also have hit points. So for example, crawlers have 1 hit point. When you hit them, they're dead. Stalkers take more hit points to kill. On the darkness board, you can keep track when bigger guys are on the board of how many they do. And there's also a chart here that keeps track. As you do these, when it's their turn to activate, they'll show what priority they move towards an attack. So perhaps these guys, they move, it says proximity. So they move towards the closest hero first. Then after that, they move towards the hero with the highest threat. Then they move towards the hero with guile. And then there's different things on how they attack. Like, for example, these crawlers have a chance to attack someone and poison them. The stalkers here. So each enemy has very specific things that they do. And players will be following these instructions and fighting these as swarms of them come out. Now, swarms are good in some sense because if you kill 3 or more enemies, a treasure will drop. You can go pick up the treasure, pull from the bag, and hopefully you'll get something like this long sword, which gives you +2 10-sided dice and an extra fate die. And it's -1 AP on whenever you roll the rage symbol on the fate dice, which is great. So there's some really cool features when you find this equipment. Now, I've already shown you the warrior, who's basically your tank, and go through. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the other heroes. You have the brigand, who's basically your thief and can hide into the shadows and sneak around and attack people from behind. He can move quickly and stab people in the back. That's basically what his cards are good for. Then we have the apprentice, who is kind of like a magician, except they have blink. They're going to leech and use all sorts of things like illuminate and fingers of Aya to attack enemies. And each player has some pretty cool cards where they can really just wail on the enemy. Then we have your archer here, who has arrows that they will be taking from the cards that they play and storing, and then they'll find weakness or through Needle's Eye and use these arrows to shoot at the enemy. You have to make sure you have arrows in your quiver at all times and manipulate your deck to best use these characters. This one here is good at ranged combat. Then we have the Acolyte, who can heal people, but at the same time they're holding a giant hammer and they can smite people, but they can pray and save up prayer points to use for armor, to buff up their opponents, to Guardian Angel, different cards that they can play to help other people. The game comes, like I said, with these special fate dice and 10-sided dice, which you'll be using for attacking. The game comes with all sorts of tiles that you'll be able to place on the board, and tokens that will be used. There's some tokens I didn't mention that you can get when you disarm traps, called serendipity tokens. You can use these for a variety of really awesome effects, but they're very rare tokens when they come around, so you have to decide when best to use them. And you just continue to go on until you defeat the different scenarios. That's a very, very basic overview of the game. Well, first of all, production values.
Off the chain.
Yeah.
Wicked awesome.
I'm trying to think if there's anything in the production. The cards were good quality.
Yep.
I like the artwork.
Yeah.
I really like the layout of the cards. They were easy to understand.
Yes.
Except some of the bonuses were really small and hard to read.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, up at the top. Well, up at the top where the card actually tells you how much damage it does and how much that was really small.
Yeah, I could have made that bigger. But okay, the miniatures. Now, I tend to like miniatures, and some games have better miniatures than others, but this may have the best miniatures of any board game I own, maybe. They're better than Descent, the quality, definitely.
Okay.
They're better than, the quality is better, maybe they're not as good as the Super Dungeon Explorer ones, but they're quite good models, and they look awesome, too.
Yeah.
I really like the look of them. They're fantasy, but it's a little bit different than generic.
Yeah.
But it's not weird and nasty. I don't know how to. What you say.
It's kind of like it's not the grotesque fantasy. It's more of a cartoony kind of fantasy. Kind of like maybe the cutting edge cartoons on Saturday mornings around noon. Not the real early ones where all the little kids are up. The pretty cool cartoons on Sunday.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the fantasy models they got here.
We've seen several of the models, and you can find them on the internet. Mm-hmm. Several of the models that are coming out. They have undead, and they're really good models. Yeah. Okay, so obviously production value, the dice are well done. I'm a big fan personally of a game that doesn't use 6-sided dice. I think I like 10-sided dice. It gives you more range. So let's talk about the game itself. I got to be honest with you. Learning this game is heavy.
There's
a lot going on in this game. The best way to learn Myth is to have someone else who knows it teach it to you. Well, no, I mean it really is. I mean the rule book is really well done.
Yeah.
But it's, think of it as akin to a miniatures rule book. Like let's say you got 40K, Warhammer 40K. The first time I said, Sam's like, let's play this. He was already playing it, so I decided to learn it, and I got the book, and I was like, what is this? You know, it's the same kind of feel. Once you play the game, I don't think
the fog lifts.
It's like organic almost.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say right now, I don't think this is like any other game I've ever played. I mean, it's a dungeon crawl, obviously.
Yeah.
Or an outside crawl or whatever, but it's a dungeon crawl. But it's not a Descent clone at all.
No.
Very different. And I would say on rules level and complexity level of how to play it, even more so than any other dungeon crawler I've ever played. Not to the point, don't be scared away with like it's so complex, you gotta look up charts all the time. You don't have to.
No, you don't. Because everything is laid out for you. The cards that the bad guys are using, the creatures for the cards, it has everything you need on the card as far as what you need to hit, what you need for defense, and all this other kind of stuff. And then the cards that you're playing, the cards that you're using, they have all the information there, so you don't have to look up any charts or anything like that. So, this is probably, as far as level of complexity, I would say actually just above Descent. And the reason I say just above Descent is because I think that the party members have to work together much more in order to survive than people in Descent have to work.
Right, and folks, if you don't know what we're talking about Descent from Fantasy Flight Games, which is one of my favorite games, a great game.
Yeah.
And there are other dungeon crawl board games, not many of them though, but there are others. Most dungeon crawl board games, you move through, you roll dice, you fight monsters.
Yeah.
And at first blush, that's kind of what you're doing here, but like Sam said, the teamwork element is so high, and each of the 5 characters in here play so differently.
Yeah.
I've never seen characters so differentiated before. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, I'm good at ranged, you're good at melee. No, it's I'm good at ranged, but also I need to make sure I'm doing this, and you need to be doing... And you mentioned teamwork. I think this may be the most teamwork-oriented board game I've ever played.
And that's really what makes it stand up kind of above its predecessors. I don't want to hype the game up too much because it is a dungeon crawler. That's what it is. So I'm not building too much into it, but the teamwork aspect that you have to get to in this one, I think far outshines any of the other dungeon crawls that I've played. And that's one of the things I really, really enjoyed about Myth, is that you have to, it's almost like you have to take the first 3 or 4 games and you play one character.
And learn that character.
And learn how to play that character to its best while everybody else does the same thing. And then you switch and you do the same thing 3 or 4 games in a row so that you can learn the next character. And then, so there's a really steep learning curve on how to play your character and how to get it to work best with the team around you. So
yeah, there's 2... I'm going to be recommending this game, but there's 2 types of people who will not like this game. One is what is often known as the munchkin. This is the guy who's like, I want to get the treasure. I want to run in and kill everything first. And many dungeon crawls allow that.
Otherwise known as Jason.
No, but that person in this game, you cannot win this by yourself.
Yeah,
not at all. There are many games where one character gets so powerful, they do everything by themselves. Here, you are absolutely needing the other person to buff you, to help you, to stop the bad guys from moving too many times.
But some of the characters do have those special cards to where they are able to do a lot of damage. And it's tempting to say, step aside, I got this, and then you go forward and you raise the threat level on your character so high to where, big Mondo, huge boss comes out and just wipes the floor with the rest of the team. So there is that temptation because your character is pretty cool. Even the lowest levels. They
and everybody has some awesome combo you can pull off, so where you will feel like.
Yeah, so it's tempting to do that, but it's detrimental to the rest of the group, and that's why I really enjoyed this, because it tries to balance out that Munchkin guy who wants to go up and he knows he can slaughter everything, so he does, and he gets everything, and the rest of the group is just like, with their bags of popcorn watching him do it. It mitigates that, and that's really what I liked about the teamwork of Myth.
The other person who shouldn't play this game is the alpha gamer, for pretty much the same reasons.
Yeah.
This is a cooperative game, and a lot of people don't like cooperative games because one person tells everyone what to do. Well, they can't tell you what to do because you're sitting there trying to make your own decisions.
You have a list. You have cards in front of you that restrict what you're able to do.
And really, I can just say, I'm going. What are you going to do about that? Now, that's bad team morale problem.
Yeah, that's bad.
But it's very possible, and I'm telling you, there are so many times when you'll play this game and you'll be like, oh, if only we could rewind. There's a lot of things you wish you could have done.
Yeah.
If there's any complaint I have about the game, other than that it's deep and heavy to get into, is it's a little more freeform than I would like. Now, I understand the benefits of that. You're like, oh, look, in this box, this is a toolkit. Ooh, look at all the cool stuff inside it. But I almost wish they said this is what to do next sometimes, because you'll be like, oh, we can do whatever we want. Sometimes I'd rather a little bit more structure, but there is some stuff online where you can get that structure and you can follow them.
And that's part of the problem with the rule book, as you were mentioning before. It is a good written, it's a well-written rule book. It's just that it's written in that free-form style to where it doesn't say, do this, now do this, now do this, now do this, now do this. Now this is how you play through a round, and now this is how you do this. It doesn't do that. It just says this is what this does, and this is what this does, and this is how they work together, but it doesn't really touch on how to play the game.
It does remind me of one of my favorite video games, Gauntlet, where the monsters keep coming out and out and out of the spawn points. It's not the first board game to do that. Super Dungeon Explorer did that too and stuff. But this one, like I said, the positives, characters which are completely unique and more on the way. And also some customization of them as time goes by.
Right.
To add new cards to the deck, to make the decks cooler. I mean, we were talking to them and they were just, there's so much on the line for this game.
Right.
Beautiful production, promotes teamwork, can be lengthy, although you could play just small sections of it at a time, like most of these games. So while there are some small detriments to the game, I'm still giving this huge high ratings from me. I'm going to give it 1 spear up and 1 bow arrow of fire raising splitting Hawkeye nonsense go arrow. That's the horrible rating. Yeah.
I'm going to give this 2 absolutely huge prayer books up, and when you get the game, you'll understand why. I played the Acolyte character, and
now
really fun.
You really like that character a lot?
I did.
See, and I played the Archer most of the time, and that is who I like too. And I really, because I looked at his character and the other characters, and I said, I see how good that character is. That's pretty cool. But that's not my play style. Right. This is the one I like. But I could switch to a different play style, but I would have to play completely differently.
Right. Anyway,
certainly a good game coming out in March, I believe. And if you like fantasy at all, definitely check it out. Definitely.
Yep. If you're a Descent fan, I think this will hit right along your...
I don't think it replaces Descent,
though. It doesn't. No, it doesn't, because it has a lot of differentiating factors in it. But if you like Descent, you'll love this game. So I don't see a problem with going out to pick this up. You won't duplicate Descent with this. You'll get some more complexity with Descent. Maybe you don't like Descent with complexity. I still think you'll like this game.
All right. That's Myth.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.